Yes. Hello, everyone. I would like you to think that we are living in 1947, 1 year before the creation of the State of Israel. So just imagine that we live in 1947, and imagine one more thing, that we already know the future. We already know what the next 75 years is going to bring to the area of Israel-Palestine. And we are asked to make a decision whether or not to announce the creation of a Jewish state. And we know that after we announce the creation of a Jewish state, many wars will happen. Many Israelis and Palestinians will be killed, and many will be injured. Many wars between Israel and Palestine will bring a lot of death and destruction. The Israelis will not be able to come up with a constitution. They will be occupying the Palestinians, and the Palestinians would live in an apartheid system, and the Israelis too. And the Israelis will fight between themselves on what does it mean to have a Jewish state. So if we know all of that in 1947, my question to you is, would we take the step of announcing a Jewish state? Now, we are now in 2023. We cannot change history, but what we can do is we can try to repair history. And that's what the IPC is all about. We are trying to do what should have been done in 1947, which is to create a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine. But because we have an Israeli and Palestinian government, the IPC has a formula to deal with the existing governments without dismantling them. And that formula is on our website, WWIP Confederation. You can read our constitution. You can read the questions and answers, and you can read how this common government will function with the existing Israeli and Palestinian governments. My name is Joseph Avasar. My email is josephavassar@gmail.com, and you can send me your comments regarding the formula for peace and the IPC, and I'll be happy to respond to you. Our guest today is Avner Gvaryahu. Avner was born in Rehovot and raised in a religious Zionist community. He served as a staff sergeant in the paratrooper brigade. After being discharged from the Israeli military, he joined Breaking the Silence as a researcher and a tour guide focusing on work with world Jewry. He later became the director of public outreach and has been the organization's executive director since August 2017. Avner holds a bachelor's degree in social work from Tel Aviv University and a master's degree from the Institute for the Study of Human Rights at Columbia University in New York. I met with Avner on Zoom, and we discussed the IPC formula at length. He chose to deal with three legislation, one that has to do with a common police force, joint economic zone, and Disney Gaza legislation. On September 17, we will have Hussein Ibish. He's a senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. He appeared on many television programs and wrote for the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the LA Times, as well as many other publications. On October 1st, we will have Alon Burstein. He is a visiting assistant professor and is an Israeli Institute Fellow in the Department of Political Science at the University of California, Irvine. On October 15, we will have Dr. Einat Wilf. She is a former Israeli politician who served as a member of the Knesset for Independence and the Labor Party. And she wrote this book that is called The War of Return. She's a co-author for this book. On November 1st, we will unveil the billboard in Tel Aviv, which says a Jewish state is bad for Jews. That billboard will stay for 30 days. And hopefully it will trigger some discussion about the introduction that I made about whether a Jewish state is good or bad for Jews, and what do we do now that a Jewish state exists. We had many previous participants. As you can see on the list, Noam Chomsky appeared twice, and he also recorded a video in support of our formula for peace. But we also had other professors who did the same, and we are very thankful. Other people we're trying to get, but they are not really responding. In my opinion, many are afraid of peace or afraid to accept one formula for peace other than the two-state solution or the one-state solution, which I think neither one is realistic. Our formula for peace, in my opinion, is the most realistic. We will have a discussion with Avner after our simulation. The whole event will take 120 minutes. It's segments. Each segment is about 5 minutes. And then after each segment, we will ask Avner to opine and give us his perspective on what we are doing in our formula for peace. I'd like to show you a video that explains what is our formula for peace.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. and the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
So we would like to conduct a pre-simulation survey. Could you please vote at this time whether you support a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine? Please vote yes or no. Okay. 5 more seconds, please vote. Okay, so 16 out of 19, 84% voted yes. 3 out of 19, 16% voted no. Hopefully we will do the same survey at the end of the simulation, and hopefully we will get the no's to change to yes and not the other way around. Okay. We are trying to show how our formula for peace could make peace. We are not anti-Israeli or anti-Palestinians. We are not pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinians. We are pro-Israeli Palestinians. Avner Gvaryahu is not a representative of the IPC. He was invited to stress test, from his perspective, the formula for peace. We follow our own narrative, our own formula. We are not, like I said, we are not Israeli or Palestinian point of view. We are nationwide point of view. Nationwide means from the river to the sea. We expect to have a rigorous discussion with Avner, but hopefully it would be a respectable, we will respect each other in the discussion. We do not preclude other formula for peace. In fact, we invite other organizations to present their formulas. And we are not claiming exclusivity. We're showing you a picture of a slave, and we are saying that we do not believe in perfection. If you believe in perfection, you're basically being slave to the inability to complete a task. We are saying we are not perfect, but we are good. And we will ask Avner to judge our formula, not based on perfection, but based on the alternative. Could the IPC formula attain peace? Is the IPC formula implementable? If not, why not? Is there a downside to either the Israeli or the Palestinians in accepting the IPC formula? We are proposing legislation to demonstrate how the common government could exist and flourish and compete with the Israeli and the Palestinian governments and make peace. We cannot show all possible legislations. These are just suggestions. We anticipate that when there is a common government, they will follow their own narrative, but we're just demonstrating how it could happen. This is a simulation. A simulation is a model that mimics the operation of an existing or proposed system. This is not a lecture. So we are asking you to ask questions, but to refrain from comments. So if you look at the picture of this airplane and you say, how does this plane fly? That's a question. We encourage questions, but we are asking you to keep your comments, either to put them in the chat or to the end. So a comment like, Israel will never allow that to happen. The Palestinians will never allow that to happen. It's not going to ever make peace. These are comments we understand, and by the way, we have many recordings, so you can refer to the comments from the previous recording, but you can wait until the end. We ask you, please wait until the end or put your comments on the chat, but ask questions. We are encouraging questions. In order to conduct the simulation, which this is a simulation, we need you to assume certain facts. These are not real facts, but for the purpose of conducting the simulations, we're asking you, please assume that we have conducted an election that the election was for the whole area of Israel and Palestine, meaning Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, from the river to the sea. And that the election lasted until today, and 14 million people, with the exclusion of minors, were allowed to vote, and 5 million people voted, 3 million Palestinians voted, 2 million Israelis voted. I, Joseph, was elected as president, so that you know, in real life, I cannot even be president. I don't have the aspiration to be president, but just for the purpose of the simulation, please assume that I was elected by 1.5 million votes, and a vice president, a Palestinian lady, was elected by 1.3 million votes, and we will rotate. I will become vice president, and she will become president in 2 years. I also want you to assume that 300 parliament members were elected in 300 districts, and each district encompasses 47,000 people. Some of the districts are Israeli, some of them are Palestinians, and many of those districts are mixed districts, meaning Israelis and Palestinians living together. Does anyone have any questions regarding those assumptions? Avner, do you have any questions regarding those assumptions or comments? For you, you're allowed to make comments regarding those assumptions. Avner.
So I wish you a lot of luck as the new president.
Thank you.
We can have a campaign, yes, Joseph, no, Joseph. Like, yes,
But
Bibi,
no, there is no campaign. I was already
no campaign,
elected.
sorry. Already elected, sorry.
I'm already elected.
Yeah, no, I have a question about the number. Maybe I think I know the answer, but the clarification: the Palestinian Parliament, right? You're referring to both Gaza and the West Bank, right? And you're referring to a Palestinian parliament that has representatives from both, or a body that represents the two separate geographic areas?
The whole area it has 300 districts. Some of the districts are in Gaza. Some of the districts are in Israel. And many districts are together, Palestinians and Israelis together. So, for example, just to clarify for you, let's say district number 37 could be in northern Gaza and southern Israel, which means it would be Palestinians and Israelis together. The same thing with the West Bank. Many districts will be Palestinians and Israelis together. The same thing with Jerusalem. What I'm trying to tell you, there are no Palestinian districts or Israeli districts. There are only districts. And there are Palestinians and Israelis who live in those districts, and they are permitted to vote for whoever they want.
Yeah, no, so that's fine. And we will refer to the two parliaments, right? Here was an election for the new parliament, right? The IPC parliament, but there's also a relationship with the Israeli and the Palestinian parliament.
No, this is an independent and separate.
No, I understood, but you said, but in the video it says, and you repeated it, that if there's a relationship, right, between the new parliament, and if there's bills elected in, then there has to be a question in the respective parliaments.
The only
Right.
relationship is that the common government gives a veto power to the separate Israeli and the separate Palestinian governments. That's the
Right.
only relationship.
Right. So when we're talking, so my question is, when it comes to the Palestinian government, if we're talking about something that is happening now, then how do we deal with the chasm between Fatah and Hamas? Chasm is a light term, and they're
Right.
definitely not one parliament, at least now.
Right. Well, we decide who to give a veto power to based on whether we need to give a veto power to that entity. So there is coming up legislation to give a veto power to the Israeli government, to the Hamas government, and to the PA government, because in my judgment as the president, those governments, even though they are not really legitimate government, but they can block us from implementing our legislation. And since they can block us, we want to get their cooperation, and we give each one of them, the proposed legislation that is coming up will give each one of them a veto power. Any other questions or questions about the assumptions?
Yes, I had a question. This is Don
Yeah.
Raphael.
Yeah, hi, Don.
From San Francisco, the Bay Area. How do you anticipate the existing governments giving permission to have such an election? And assuming that took place and an IPC government was put in place, how do you legitimize the actions and legislations of the IPC if depending on the legislation, one of the other governments is constantly vetoing any actions proposed?
Okay, we are not seeking permission to conduct the election. There is no need to seek permission. We are the people of Israel and Palestine. We do not need to have permission from the Israeli or the Palestinian governments to create our own government, a legitimate government. And therefore, it will be up to the Israeli or the Palestinian governments to object to the election, but they haven't objected. We are assuming that they haven't, but we don't see a reason for them to object. But even if they do object, we actually think that it would be a blessing in disguise, because they will expose their failure to make peace, and they will not be able to interfere with the election, because the election takes place online. Regarding legitimacy, we are the only legitimate government in Israel, Palestine, because we are the only government that permits the people that we eventually going to be the government of to vote. The Israeli government does not permit the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, who they control, to vote. The Palestinian governments do not give the Israeli or the Palestinian the right to vote. So we will be the only legitimate government. And just like any democracy, we will insist that those legislation that we pass will not be vetoed. And if they are vetoed, then we will work to either change the legislation to accommodate legitimate concerns by Israel or Palestine. And we will also work to put pressure on the Israeli and the Palestinian governments to expose them and to delegitimize their stand within the people of Israel and Palestine, and also within the international community. Any other questions? Okay, hearing no questions. Avner, are you willing to accept those assumptions for the purpose of the simulation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Shlomo, you have a question about this?
Yeah. Quickly. So what if the Israeli government says, not only we not approving this IPC, we think this is, you are going against our interests, you are intervening in our politics, and the answer is no, absolutely no, and we would not allow you to do anything and regarding any elections with Israeli Palestinians, no. You can be friends with the Palestinians, you can talk to them, but when it comes to government, to politics, forget it. Suppose that's what they say.
Well, that would be a competition. It would be a competition for the hearts and minds of the people, and we will do our utmost to change the narrative and to expose the governments that is being unreasonable. That's because we are the only legitimate government. We were elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. So there are going to be a lot of objections, maybe, but we will do our utmost to expose them and to show that they don't really have an answer, and we do have the right answer for peace. So,
I know, but imagine the United States. Imagine we have now.
Wait. No, only questions. We're not going to get into argument. We have a lot of business to do. So the speaker accepts those assumptions. The audience, I assume, accept, and you have to understand that the simulation is based on the acceptance of those assumptions. From now on, we are going to work as if those assumptions that I put forward here are true. That's how we are working from now on. And I believe that those assumptions could be achieved with $100 million. Now, we are asking the audience to act as either Israeli Prime Minister, Palestinian Authority, and Hamas leader in this simulation. This is a simulation. So at this point, I need volunteers. Do I have a volunteer to act as Hamas leader? Is there someone in the audience who is willing to be Hamas leader for the purpose of the simulation? Please. I need a volunteer. I need a volunteer. Sean. Okay, Sean, you will be the Hamas leader. Sean. Okay, I need a volunteer for a PA leader.
Waleed has his hand up.
Okay, Waleed is the PA. Avner, are you willing to volunteer to be the Prime Minister of Israel?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the Prime Minister, we have Hamas leader. The rest of you will have to act as either Israeli or Palestinian parliament members. Remember, what is your district? You need to, and I may ask you, what is your district? What district do you represent? Either in Israel, and please be intellectually honest and be consistent, because you will be asked to vote as either Israeli or Palestinian parliament. So let's take a test and see how many Palestinian parliament members do we have in today in this simulation. Please vote for Palestinian parliament members only. Vote. Don, can you put the voting? Don? Don, I need you to put the voting. I don't see it.
Is it Dan who does it?
I think you mean Dan.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. Dan, can you put the voting?
I don't see Dan here.
He
Oh.
was.
Yeah, I don't see him online right now.
Don is,
Joseph.
Don
Dan,
is online.
we need to have
Really?
Palestine, we need to
Hold on.
have the voting, Palestinian parliament, Palestinians, please vote.
I don't see him.
Len, what is your question?
My question is, when you said intellectual honesty, we have to change this map to say Israel and the Palestinian Authority, not to say Israel and occupied territories, because that's not real. That's not official. The Palestinian areas are the areas under the Palestinian Authority
Okay,
right now.
you are not asking a question. I'm asking for question. Dan, can you put the voting, please? For Palestinian parliament members. Dan, can we hear you?
I'm telling you, I don't see Dan. I don't think he's online.
Okay.
I believe Dan has left because all of a sudden you were a co-host and then you were the only host.
Okay, maybe Sunday. I know he had a problem with Zoom before.
He must have dropped his internet connection.
Okay, this is the first time this has occurred. Let me stop sharing and I'll send him an invitation and make him a host.
Joseph, you have to change the screen so we see you all head. We see only part of it.
Let me call him on the phone. Hi, Dan. We don't see.
Yeah, AT&T has an internet outage right now.
Oh, okay. So can I do the voting myself?
Should be host. Are you host?
I think I'm a co-host.
Well, when I left, it should make you automatically host.
Okay, but I don't see the voting. Okay,
You should see the voting if you move your mouse pointer down to the bottom of the screen. It'll show all the options, and then you just select the option for the poll.
Hey, Joseph, can you appoint someone else to be co-host because you are the host, and then maybe they can do that.
yeah, okay. You want me to appoint you as the host?
I've never done it before, but I can learn real quick.
Okay. So, let me see this here.
My internet down. It must be California because my internet's down too. I'm using the phone, so
Oh,
very strange day today.
And my internet just came back. You logged back in.
okay. So, all
Oh,
right.
perfect.
1 second.
Are you back on?
I will be in a second here. Hold on. You'll have to admit me because you're host.
Okay,
One sec.
I don't see you coming on.
Just now, hold on.
Do I need to make you a host again?
Yeah, just 1 second. I'm just opening the link. Okay, I'm in the lobby.
Okay, I don't see you yet.
Hold on.
There's no one in the waiting room.
Maybe I'm joining your private link. Hold on.
I'll send you another one.
Wait.
I had a huge problem with the internet this week, but I fixed it. I send you another invitation anyway.
Okay, 1 sec.
Are you on? I send you another invitation.
Yeah, I'm in the lobby. You see me?
No?
Sure you don't see me listed there?
Let me check again. No, I don't see you. Let me. Oh. Sorry about that. There you are. Okay.
And you make host, I'll make. Yeah, make me host and then I'll make you co-host.
Okay, I made you a host.
Okay, 1 sec. Okay, I'm not host yet. You have to make me host.
Made you a host.
Sure, I don't.
There was a sign on my computer that said Dan is the host.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, we're back.
Okay. Can you do the voting now for Palestinian parliament members? Please vote. Palestinian parliament members. So you just identify yourself as Palestinian parliament members to see how many we have. Okay, we have Palestine, okay. So we have 8 Palestinian parliament members. And share the results. 8 Palestinian parliament members. And let's have Israeli parliament members, please vote.
Am I a parliament member as prime minister?
No, you're a separate government. You cannot vote. You cannot have allegiance to the Israeli government and the common government. So Walid and Sean, Hamas leaders, are also not allowed to vote. Can you please publish the results? Okay, we have 8 Israelis. Okay. Let's go on. All right, so our first order, now we have a government, we have a president, we have a parliament member. We all agree to work under that assumptions. So the first order of business is our Constitution. Libby, would you be so kind as to read the Constitution?
We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli governments, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislatures and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges, with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
All right, so basically, we are a separate government. We are precluded constitutionally from undermining any agreements between the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. They can agree to a 2-state solution. They can agree to a 1-state solution. Whatever it is they agree upon, we are constitutionally prohibited from objecting to those governments or undermining those governments. We give the Israeli and the Palestinian governments a veto power over legislation which affects their sovereignty and their control. Does anyone have any questions regarding this Constitution? Avner, you have any questions or comments regarding this Constitution?
I have a comment, and this is something I will try to get to later as well. But I think that the Constitution, even in its form, and if we accept that the elections have taken place, sort of ignores imbalance of power, sort of is trying to draw a picture that doesn't. I think that some of its flaws could be in the fact that when we're talking about a territory that is still, even if we accept the fact that elections have taken place, a region that is very much separated and controlled by one side. So I think this is as a vision, and the Constitution should have a vision element to it, is important, but does
I'm sorry, I
ignore
didn't
some of
understand.
the-
A division, DIVIS?
No,
a division. The land is separated. We're not talking about a reality where the wall is down, or the blockade in Gaza is over, or Palestinians can roam around freely. Israel still controls the entire region, even if we have even if the IPC tomorrow is elected in, that doesn't change the reality today. And a constitution that accepts that and enshrines the Israeli and Palestinian, recognizes, in fact, the Israeli government de facto recognizes the Israeli control, and I think that is problematic. It could maybe be important.
What portion of the Constitution recognizes the Israeli control?
Just the fact that believing in the fact that there are the work here, the number 3, we recognize the need to work with the Israeli and the Palestinian governments, right? I would suggest that the Constitution like this, I mean, again, part of my rejection or problem with the proposed idea is that it's a sort of a pie in the sky. But even if we're willing to go with that, I would suggest that recognition, right? We recognize the need to work with Israeli and Palestinian governments if they accept basic concepts of equality, human rights, and so on. The first point refers to it, but doesn't tie the working together with Israeli or Palestinian governments.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions, not comments, regarding the Constitution? Questions? Okay, hearing no questions, let's have a vote. And before I ask you to vote, please know that you are a Parliament member. If you have to accept the Constitution, if you do not accept the Constitution, you will be expelled from the Parliament, just like any other Parliament anywhere else in the world. Palestinian Parliament members, please vote. Do you accept the Constitution? Okay. 10 out of 10, 100% of the Palestinian Parliament members voted in favor of the Constitution. Share the results, please. And stop sharing, and please have the Israeli Parliament members, please vote. Israeli Parliament members. Okay. The Israeli Parliament member, can you share the results? 1 Israeli Parliament member voted no. Could you please identify who you are? The Israeli Parliament members who voted no on the Constitution. Could you please identify who you are? Okay, he or she is not identifying himself, but regardless, you are expelled from the Parliament, and you are not allowed to vote on any legislation, future legislation, because you do not accept the Constitution. So you cannot vote on any future legislation. Okay, now that we passed the Constitution, we have a Parliament, we have a constitution, we have a government. Let's go to the first order of business, and that is granting a veto power to the separate governments. Charles, would you please read the legislation regarding granting a veto power?
I'm not seeing it.
Oh, okay. Libby, could you please read it out?
Here. The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel and Palestine from the river to the sea. We recognize the Palestinian and Israeli governments and are seeking their cooperation to implement our vision for peace by giving them a veto. We will do our utmost to satisfy the essential needs of each government. We are pleading with the Palestinian and Israeli public to understand that while we would like to pass the best legislation possible to improve their lives, under these constraints, a perfect legislation is not possible. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel on issues in which it is indispensable, the Palestinian Authority on issues in which it is indispensable, Hamas on issues in which it is indispensable. In the event of changes in governments, this legislation may be amended or repealed. The Parliament will decide on indispensability. Vetoes may be bestowed individually or collectively.
All right, does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation that we are about to pass, the Parliament to give veto power to those governments? Avner, do you have any comments regarding these questions or comments? Okay, Waleed, I see you raise your hand, please. What is your question, Waleed?
Since I'm assuming the role of the Palestinian Authority, which is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinians, I have an issue with having Hamas the same authority as I do, or the same level of representation as I do, because we all need to agree that Hamas is a Palestinian political party that needs to be joining the fold of the whole Palestinian representation and not be a parallel representation for the Palestinians.
Yeah, we are a separate government. We are a common government. We do what's good for us, which is the people of Israel and Palestine. And therefore, we believe that under some circumstances, it's good to give Hamas a veto power because we are seeking their cooperation. You, as the PA, you have difficulties with Hamas. That's between you and Hamas. We are not here to resolve the difficulties between the PA and Hamas. We are here to make peace for the people of Israel and Palestine.
I understand that completely. That's why I emphasize the need for having a unified Palestinian representation so that there will be a much better engagement when it comes to dealing with the Israelis, a more fruitful engagement.
Yeah,
because
that's between you and the Israeli government and Hamas. We see all of you as a failure. We see all of you as an obstacle to peace. We see the Hamas, the PA, and the Israeli government all as failures, failed governments who failed to give peace to the Israeli and the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, we have to deal with you, and that's why we give you a veto power when it comes to issues that we cannot implement without giving you a veto power. But we are not here to clarify the issue between your government and Hamas or the Israeli government. Okay, I see two people raise their hands. I don't see their name. Can you please just ask your question?
So to answer that question that Waleed asked, would it be fair to say that if there was a compromise or how do we say it? Like say, for example, that they decide that they solve their problems, then it could be amended to say the government of Gaza and the West Bank, which includes all Palestinians. So this is not saying that there's a separate government in Gaza saying that right now, this is the case, but if you guys resolve this issue later, then this can be changed.
It says that it can be changed, yes. But it will be up to us to decide. The parliament will decide on indispensability. Veto may be bestowed individually or collectively. It's all up to us. If we see any entity as a obstacle that we cannot overcome, we will decide whether or not to give them a veto power. So, yeah, we are flexible, but our goal is our people. And that the people that are, my goal as the president is my people, that my people are the people of Palestine and Israel. Any other questions?
Len has one, and then I just had one, yeah.
Please ask questions. Yes. Shout your question.
The entire world recognizes Israel and it recognizes the Palestinians.
What is your question, Len?
The question is, how can you include Hamas when most of the world just considers them to be, I didn't finish, my mouth is still open. When most of the world considers them to be merely a terrorist organization.
Our goal is to make peace, okay? And if we see Hamas as a possible, if we give them a veto power, that will help peace, yes, we will give them a veto power. Any other question?
I just wanted to.
Yes, the rest of the world will be laughing at you.
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine. But we want to have peace. We're not here to satisfy the stereotypical ideas of the world. We are here to make peace. What questions? Please ask questions, not comments. We have a lot of business to do.
I just wanted to say, it is, for instance, the joint economic zone on the border of Gaza, would that be something that would like involve Hamas directly, but not so much the PA? So then that would be a situation where you'd want to be doing it that way?
Yes, on issues in which they are indispensable, meaning if we need them, we will give them a veto power. If they are not indispensable, we don't give them a veto power.
Oh, okay, thanks.
All right, let's have a vote. Palestinian parliament member. Avner, I didn't hear your a question or comment from you. You are our speaker. Palestinian parliament members, please vote.
Do you have are there any criteria for indispensability? It's a pretty vague term.
It depends on the legislation.
No, I understand, but I mean, it's a pretty vague term for something pretty dramatic. What could be an example of something indispensable for? And what do you do when there are direct contradictions between demands of each government or entity?
If they are indispensable, we give them a veto power. If they exercise the veto power, then we will try to change the legislation or try to work to expose those governments as being unreasonable. If we believe that our legislation is, we are a political powerhouse. We were elected by 5 million people, okay? I was elected by 1.5 million people. I have the political power to demand reasonable conduct by the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. And I'm going to exercise
But
that.
what do you mean? I'm just asking a clarification on indispensability, because it's a term that carries a lot of weight. And I'm wondering what constitutes something that's indispensable. I mean, what are the criteria that our parliament or your parliament has when it thinks about something dispensable or indispensable?
Okay, that's a good question. If we cannot implement the legislation unless we if they, let's say, if Hamas can prevent us from implementing the legislation, they are indispensable. If the Israeli government can prevent us from implementing the legislation, they are indispensable. If the PA can prevent us from implementing the legislation, they are indispensable. Okay, publish their results on the parliament, the Palestinian parliament members. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted yes. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Israeli parliament members. Okay, publish the results. 86% of the Israeli parliament members accepted the legislation, so it passed by more than 55% on both sides. This legislation is not subject to a veto because it does not affect the Israeli or the Palestinian governments. It's an internal legislation for us, so therefore we're not giving a veto power to any of the other governments. Let's go to the next legislation, and that is a common police force. Charles, do you see this legislation?
Yes.
Could you please read it?
Common police force, equal number of Israeli and Palestinians at each level. Distinct uniforms for the common police force different from the Israeli or Palestinian police force. Independent of the Israeli and Palestinian security forces. In cooperation with the separate Israeli and Palestinian authorities. Address sensitive religious, cultural, and language requirements. Facilitate the operation of the joint economic zones. Investigate corruption by administrators who refuse to teach tolerance. Investigate allegations of intolerance and racist hate crime against Israelis or Palestinians. Assist in managing checkpoints. Guard the parliament building and threats against members of the Confederation. Facilitate access to and safety of religious facilities. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Okay. Avner, do you have any questions regarding or comments regarding this legislation for common police force?
Yeah, I have a clarification. What does where is that? Assist in managing checkpoints. What does that mean?
That means that we will try to replace the Israeli security forces with our security forces and manage them in a much more humane way than what is being managed by the Israeli or by the Israeli military.
Yeah, okay. So I have a question on that. I mean, that seems like I understand that the theory, is sort of the simulation we're thinking of the power of the government, but I think that it sort of ignores the imbalance in power, but specifically the way that Israel sees its concept of security, which I believe is distorted and problematic. But why should Israel, who still controls the territory, even if IPC exists, still controls the area, has this, controls, why should it relent its power?
Okay, you also opted to agreed to act as the Prime Minister of Israel. So once you are given a veto power on this legislation, you can explain to us the exact same question that you're asking as a participant, as a guest. Why should we give you a veto power? Are you willing to relinquish your control over those checkpoints as Israeli Prime Minister?
Yeah, should I answer now? As Israeli.
Well,
Prime
we'll wait
Minister?
until we give you the
Okay.
veto power. But you
No
ask it, okay. Any other questions?
Yes, in regards of the checkpoints, are we talking about their current status quo, the checkpoints as they are right now?
Yes,
Are we talking about?
as they are today, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. I don't quite understand how I could see conflict taking place between the various security forces. So how would that be addressed between a common force, police force by the IPC versus the Israeli security, IDF, and Palestinian security? I mean, the concept is written down, it's clear, but I could see in practice a lot of conflict.
In
Okay.
other words, I'm
Okay,
sorry to
so
interrupt.
that's not a question. It says in cooperation with the separate Israeli and Palestinian authorities. That goes into details, which that's really technical issues, it's not really part of the simulation. We're not getting into details, but the idea is, let's see if the Israeli and the Palestinian governments agree to this, first of all. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick
Yes,
question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you see Arab soldiers taking orders from superior Israeli women?
Uh,
The
first
answer
of all,
is-
it's Palestinians. Second of all, we don't have issues with dealing with orders. So please tune
Okay.
it down.
Wait,
of this
that's really not a question about the legislation. Any question about the legislation, don't bring in questions about your ideology and pretend that it's question about the common police force.
I have a question, Joseph, if I may.
Sure.
Are we talking about establishing a new security force that
Yes.
have its full allegiance to this confederation, or are we talking about incorporating already existing troops from both sides to have their allegiance
No,
to us?
it's a common
That's
police
my
force
question.
under the Constitution. It has allegiance to the Constitution, to the common government. And then it is managed by the vice president under the Constitution. The vice president is in charge of the police, and it is a separate and independent government. And the police officers will have to pledge allegiance to the common government, Palestinians and Israelis together, not to the Israeli government and not to the Palestinian government, but to the common government. Any other questions?
Yeah, so if Israel say, forget it, no foreign powers here in the police, you just no. And so that will be it, right?
Okay, they haven't said that yet, okay? We are passing legislation first of all, okay? Any other questions?
Yes, I have another question. We talk about equality in the Constitution, and yet we talk about checkpoints. So is it contradicting or not?
It's not. We are dealing with reality on the ground, okay? And the reality on the ground is that there are checkpoints, and that we believe that that the Israeli government and the Palestinian governments are indispensable to deal with those checkpoints. Any other questions? Okay, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on the common police force. Okay, publish their results. 86% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Publish the results. Okay. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, because I think this is better than what we have now with the IDF. So I think this is better than having the IDF.
Thank
So-
you. Okay, Mr. PA leader, Palestinian Authority, are you going to veto this legislation?
As long as there is fair and equal representation with the practice of the security measures, I have no problems.
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, are you going to veto this legislation?
Of course, by all means,
And why are you going to veto this legislation?
because it gives up my ability to control the region.
Okay. Do you realize that in this police force, there are going to be Israelis and Palestinians? And you always said that you want to have peace and you want to make the lives of the Palestinians and the Israelis better. And now you change your narrative and you are talking about controlling the area. That it's not about security.
I think that for me and my government, what you call security, what we actually mean is control. So if we'll have any equal control, we're going to give up our ultimate control and therefore risk our citizens.
Okay, so Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, since I am the president of the whole area and I'm the only legitimate president in the whole area, you are not legitimate prime minister of the whole area. I am going to work internationally. I'm going to work within the people of Israel to expose you, to show that you are not really a person who care about peace. And I will
I was elected by I was elected democratically, and I think I'm the only one here with an atomic bomb.
Right. And yeah, so I am, so are you going to be using your nuclear bomb against your own people that you want to, so I'm going to work as hard as I can to expose you, to show that you are a person who does not want peace, who does not really care about security, that the only issue that you have is control. And therefore, I'm going to work internationally to try to remove you as prime minister and expose the fact that you are a danger to the people of Israel and Palestine. And this is going to be a moment that exposes you for the whole world. And therefore,
So I would just
now
say,
let me ask you this: is there any way we can change this legislation that will be acceptable to you?
I think the only way that you could change the legislation will be acceptable for me or my government is give only Israel control over crossings. That is for us, that's a necessity.
Control over what?
Checkpoints, roads, crossings.
As the Palestinian representatives for the Palestinian Authority, would it be acceptable for you as the Israeli representative to have international forces to supervise those crossings?
We do not want international forces. We are the government. We are the government of Israel, Palestine. I am the president. I believe that the area should be managed by the people of Israel and Palestine forever.
I agree with you, but I'm just trying to comfort the Israeli representative by offering him a temporary solution that could be agreed
But you have no authority to do that. I am the president. I am the president. I am not going to introduce this kind of legislation. I'm just going to expose the prime minister and to try to remove him from being the president. All right.
But he's indispensable.
Zohar
has a question, Joseph. He's speaking before his people raising their hands.
Thanks. Just a question to Avner. Hi, Avner. Nice to see you. Love your work. Right now, the Israeli police and IDF recruits both Druze and well-intentioned Arab Israelis, or primarily I think Christian ones, if I'm not mistaken, but still it incorporates non-Jewish residents of Israel into its forces. Now the question is, in this joint forces going to be combined by Israelis and Palestinians, what can't you see a way in which Israel will try to, or Israeli people will try to make sure that there's high representation of more Israelis and Jews in this type of new force?
He already told you he's not concerned about security. He wants to control the area.
I understand. Just I'm talking about the ideas. It's not necessarily giving up control, but it's just working through the same predicament that we have now, just incorporating more Palestinians into the forces.
I think, and as a prime minister of Israel, of course, I'm answering. Israel as a state, of course, welcomes the minorities within our countries that have given up any national aspirations. Right, one of my ministers in my government, Bezalel Smotrich, even said Palestinians, once we annex the territories, we'll have three options: either to leave, or to give up national aspirations, or our military will know what to do with them. So those, right, this we published in 2017 before I put him into being the Minister of Finance. So if you're a minority, doesn't matter where you're from, right? Where we don't care if you're Druze or Christian, as long as you're giving up your national aspirations. If you're not giving up your national aspirations, you're a threat to us. So we're never going to give you any real power. Limited authorities, yes. Right? Self-governance, yes. Right? But to have control over your own people, no problem. But over our people, no way.
No, this is not. No, we're
Okay,
talking about
let's go on. Let's go on to the next legislation. The purpose is to show how the common government could function. It's not really to get into the minute details.
Nasir has a question.
Okay, the next legislation is, and so this legislation was vetoed by, the previous legislation was vetoed by the Prime Minister of Israel. Joint Economic Zone. Libby, would you be so kind to read this legislation?
Joint Economic Zone, JEZ, between Israel and Gaza. Exclusive IPC management and control and cooperation with the existing governments. Common economy. Education, industry, banking, agriculture, sewer treatment, desalination plants, solar farms, wind power, and green energy. International airport and seaport. Equally accessible to Israelis and Palestinians. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Avner, as a speaker, not as a prime minister, as a speaker, do you have any questions regarding this legislation?
In terms of geographical area that this will be in, will this be in Israel, Palestine, ABC, Gaza? Any thoughts like where it's going to be geographically?
Yes, just between the area between Gaza and Israel, right near the ocean.
So will Palestinians from the West Bank, will they be allowed to enter the economic zone? I mean,
no, absolutely. We have legislation to improve connections, rail connections between Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel. Yes, and so yes, that's another legislation. Yes.
So just a last clarification, and there will be a legislation that will try to, I mean, how will West Bankers be allowed to take the train, pass into this joint economic zone if there won't be will from the Israeli government?
Well, that would be subject to legislation. We deal one legislation at a time. At this time is the joint economic zone. Our intention is to have everyone use it, Israelis and Palestinians in all of the area, yes. But it would be subject to specific legislation, one legislation at a time. Any other questions? Okay, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on this legislation. Okay, publish the results. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members accepted this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Publish the results. 86% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I'm not going to veto it. However, is Gaza still under siege, even if we have a joint economic zone? Yeah.
The purpose of the joint economic zone is to open Gaza from not being under siege.
Okay, so no, I'm not going to veto it.
Okay, let's have the PA leader. Are you going to veto this legislation?
Before I make a decision, I need to have some things clarified. To begin with, how are we going to be processing the sour treatment? Because we know that it's all being poured into Gaza, unfortunately. That's one. Two, how are we going to be distributing the money from this? Whatever production, how it's going to be distributed? Is it going to be distributed into 3 shares?
The income?
Yes, or 2 shares.
Okay, these are technical questions, but the income will go mostly to those that invested in it. You know, either invested by way of contributing land or by economic investment. We are going to be seeking international investment in this. Yes. And we will be asking your government to invest financially in this too.
I have another question. What guarantees can you have for the sustainability of such projects? As in them not having those projects being destroyed or demolished?
I mean, the only guarantee is the agreement of the 3 governments not to be involved in any violence, because it's not going to be in their interest to be involved in any violence, because they will be harming the people of Israel and Palestine.
You're asking me to trust you so much, Mr. President, but for the sake of my people, I will. So I won't have any vetoes.
Okay. Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I'll support it.
Okay, good. So this legislation has passed by all 3 governments. It has passed by the parliament. Congratulations. We have a major legislation that was passed by everyone. And it's a huge moment for the people of Israel and Palestine. Let's go to the next legislation, which is very similar, and that's Gaza and Israel. Our purpose is to change this to this, to change this to this, to change this to this. So I am the president. I am asking these 3 governments to give me authority according to discuss with the Disney Corporation to create a Gaza Disneyland. Libby, could you please read this legislation?
Some of it kind of goes off the edge, so I think I can do it. The Israeli Palestinian Parliament, the Israeli government, Hamas government and the Palestinian Authority hereby authorize the President of the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation to commence negotiations with the Disney Corporation to construct a Gaza-Israel Disneyland at the border between Gaza and Israel. We authorize the IPC President to make the following representation on our behalf. 1, we agree to allocate a substantial area to the Disney Corporation to construct the Gaza-Israel Disneyland. 2, we agree that Gaza and Israel will each allocate 50% of the land and will each provide equal number of employees. 3, we agree to halt all military hostility and guarantee that Gaza, Israel, Disneyland be protected from any violence. And finally, Gaza, Israel, Disney will be part of the IPC Joint Economic Zone.
All right. Avner, as our speaker, do you have any questions regarding this legislation?
Yeah, I think that the first clarification is sort of similar to the economic zone, but here we're talking literally on the border to be sort of a joint, right? Allocate 50% of the land. How do you, who's in charge of security, allowing people in from each side? The IPC security forces?
Correct, in cooperation with the Israeli and the Palestinian forces, yes.
I mean, we're still talking about a situation where the disparities, the structure disparity between Israel, sort of a pretty strong economy in the region, versus Gaza, one of the poorest, most densely populated areas. I mean, there are obviously problems there that I think make it very challenging. I wonder if there's any thought.
Well, let me just respond to you. The state of California, with 40 million people, has disparity with the state of Wyoming, okay? But still, they work in the same system of a federal government, with 2 senators from each state, with a lot more congressmen from California. But we have worked a system. Our formula is to try to work with the Israelis and the Palestinians together, even if there is a disparity in terms of power, in terms of political power, in order to elevate everyone and to cooperate with everyone in order for everyone to benefit, and not to use that disparity as a dagger to prevent peace.
Yeah, no, it's sort of a win-win kind of, and all the legislations are a win-win, but our region isn't into win-win. It's more about.
Well, that's what we want to change. We want to change.
Yes,
that.
but I think it's more entrenched. But another question I have is why Disney? I mean, I'm sure you're aware of this, but at least in growing elements within the Israeli society, especially represented in the Israeli government, there is massive pushback against Disney, specifically because they're seen as too progressive and promoting LGBTQ characters, and generally much too liberal in the eyes of many Israelis. So I'm thinking, why was Disney
because Disney has huge economic power that can benefit the people in Gaza, will give them, and the people in Israel would give them employment for years, forever. It would change the economy forever. Now, we can work with them about certain issues, but the main thing is to elevate economically and to give peace. And I am the president. I think that Disney is very well suited to do so, to help the economy of the area and to promote peace.
Yeah, no, I love Disney. I enjoy Disneyland, but I'm saying that there is a growing element within the Israeli society that is becoming more religious, less open-minded, and are much more interested to safeguard, as they see it, safeguard their own children than promoting economical prosperity. And I think that is something to take into consideration.
Yeah, Disney, a lot of religious people from all religions go to Disney. Children love Disney. So that's why we chose Disney. Let's have a vote by the parliament members. Are you, first of all, are you parliament member, are you authorizing me as the president to discuss this possibility with Disney? I need authorization from my parliament members. Please vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Okay, publish the vote. 91% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation to authorize me to discuss a Disneyland with this Disney Corporation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Okay, publish the votes. 83% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor. So the parliament passed it. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you willing to allow me to represent on your behalf the that you are willing to have a Disneyland between Gaza and Israel to negotiate with the Disney Corporation?
I don't mind. If there's a Disneyland, it's fine. But one question, will that make less tension between Israel and Gaza?
I believe so. It would create tremendous amount of engagement, and it would, once we have a Disney, the Israelis would not be able to attack. It would be inconsistent with the notion of violence. And yes, it would, and it would add economically to both Israel and Palestine.
Because according to what Avner said, is that if all the Israeli are becoming less liberal, more close-minded, more worried about their children and the safety, then them going to Disneyland, then they're going to feel insecure going there with the people from Gaza. Then I don't know if this is going to work or not. So,
well, Disney is not going to only serve the people of Israel or Palestine. It's going to serve people from the whole world, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, because remember, we just agreed to build an international airport and seaport. So it will be up to Disney to see whether they see the economic benefit. But all I'm asking at this time is your authorization to tell them I spoke with the Hamas leader. He gave me authorization to negotiate at Disneyland. That's all I'm asking at this time. Let's go to the PA leader. Mr. PA leader, are you willing to give me that authorization?
I'm truly inclined. I'm very tempted. I just need to clarify on the second point. It's mentioned that 50% is going to be allocated from Gaza and Israel. But at the same time, I'm worried that Gaza has such a small geographical area that 50% of such a big project will be too much geography taking from it for that project. That's one point. And the second point is that you mentioned providing equal number of employees. So as I assume it's 50% Palestinian, 50% Israeli, or are we talking 50% Israeli, 25% from the West Bank and 25 from Gaza? That's from what has been presented. Another thing that truly that truly problematic to me is that this project being so close to Gaza, and since I have issues with Hamas, I don't trust having a direct relationship between Hamas and Israel. I feel that I'm being excluded. So how can you guarantee that I will be there, represented fairly, as an authority that is residing in the West Bank?
But you see yourself as the president of the Palestinians in Gaza.
Absolutely. That's
Right.
why I spoke about the
Are
geography
you
of
willing? Are you willing to help me help the Palestinians in Gaza who you claim to be their president? There are 2 million
Again,
people there.
you're asking me to trust you too much.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that my worry and my concern is that there will be deals being cut on the side, and I don't
Okay.
want to be left out.
Oh, it's not whether you personally, you have 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. You have
Yes.
60% unemployment in Gaza, okay?
Yes.
This is an opportunity to give the people in Gaza, who you believe to be the president of, to change their economic, to have them live in peace. And you are basically, to be honest, you seem to be wanting to destroy Hamas using this legislation. You should be worried about the people, your people in Gaza.
If I'm that worried, I wouldn't be cutting off the salaries of the employees in Gaza and laying them off. So yes, that's my main concern, not to strengthen Hamas in Gaza.
Are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes, I will.
Okay. All right. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
I'll be honest. I would have loved to take my children to Disneyland and the border of Gaza. But if I do that, I lose my government. Probably, in half a second. I'm based on ultra-Orthodox and settler supporters. No chance that they will allow a state-led project that will bring Israelis and Palestinians together. We're doing fine economically, actually. And most of our education system is segregated. I don't think that we will threaten that in any way. So yeah, I will definitely veto.
Okay. Mr. Prime Minister, are you aware that substantial number of your voters, your supporters, come from southern Gaza, southern Israel, near Gaza, and you all and you have not been able to give them peace. They've been subjected to violence with Gaza almost several times a year. We are offering you an opportunity to give peace and security to the people in southern Israel, and you are basically ignoring them. So again, I'll have to work against you. I'm asking you and the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority to see the benefit of your people, not to see the benefit of your government. I'm sorry. You have to see the benefit of the people of Gaza and the people of Israel that you claim to want, give them peace and security. But look, I'm not going to push this further. We need to.
I want to clarify something, Joseph,
Yes.
Mr. President, if I may. If you can guarantee me that this project will be part of the bigger umbrella provided by the joint economic zone that we have agreed on the previous legislation, then I might be tempted to change my mind.
It says that it's part of the joint economic zone.
I understand, but the 50% land allocated from Gaza confused me a little bit, because I assumed that the economic zone from the previous legislation will be on the borders of Gaza, taken from Israeli land.
Okay,
Now
the
you're telling me this project,
land is still in Gaza. It's just that we are asking for for the, I mean, instead of having, what land are you concerned about? This land here or this land here? That is basically nomad. It's a military zone. This is the land that you are concerned about not turning it into Gaza. Okay, but look,
Because we
the
know that
point- I
such a
think the point
project
is
won't
made.
come alone.
Look, the point is made. We are
Yes,
not.
yes.
This is only a simulation.
Go
okay?
ahead, go ahead.
All right. Okay. Post-simulation survey. After participating in the simulation, do you support a common government for the people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza that will coexist with the Israeli and the Palestinian government? Let's have a vote. This is everyone vote now, and then we'll have an open discussion with Avner. Okay, publish the votes. 19 out of 20 voted yes. 1 out of 20 voted no. 95% voted yes. Versus 84 at the beginning of the simulation. So, and 5% voted no versus 16% voted no at the beginning. So we must have done something to convince you. And now I'm going to go into open discussion. And with Avner, I give you an opportunity to say opening remarks, and then we'll have questions for you. Avner, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. This was more enjoyable than I anticipated. Joseph, no, I gave him a bit of a hard time in our initial conversation. I have and you've heard some of it already, but I have some key problems with some of the not details of the IPC, but some of the assumptions that led to forming the IPC, and I think that they're deeper, and at least in our work, I think I'm seeing them more frequently in recent months, years, and I understand why, and they have to do with your opening remarks, and the opening remarks are, we're stuck for years. For years, we've basically talked about, different ideas or different plans. People talked about the two-state solution, but in the end, we're not moving to any resolution. And I accept it, but I would say that we're in this moment because of a thematic and structured plan that my government has put in place. There's blame to go all around from Palestinian leadership to the international community. But as an Israeli, and as an Israeli that is active here and spent the past, almost 14 years of his life diving into this reality, I think that it's true that, for 25 years we talked about the two-state solution and there wasn't a two-state solution, but I'm scared, or I'm fearful, that we're going to spend the next 25 years talking about confederations without there being a confederation. When what's happening on the ground with a theoretical discussion, it could be a federation, it could be, one land, two homelands, or different ideas, that are sort of in or out of the box. My fear is, as we are thinking, talking, and even having sort of a vision, it's sort of a replacement for political strategy. And I think part of what we have to think about, and this is, I think, where a lot of my emphasis goes, is understand the fact that there isn't an attempt to create a win-win situation. There's actually an attempt to create a system that's by Israel for Israel. Israel has the ultimate power, right? It's not by the people for the people, right? We're not in the US. We're not in the US today, and but we're not in a different context. We're in a reality where what we're trying to create is a system where we can continue to control, and that's why I think that economical zones, by all means, Israel will support this economical piece, but this will not translate into actual sharing of power because there's a embedded imbalance of power. Right? And I think that in order to do that, in order to change that, part of what is needed is to recognize the fact that cutting off Palestinian communities from each other, preventing freedom of movement, the direct control of soldiers invading homes, roads, schools. I was a sergeant of a snipers team. That's what I did for 3 years. I invaded homes. I made my presence felt. I instilled into the Palestinians a sense that they're being chased. It's a literal translation of an order. But part of what we're trying to do is not only separate Israelis from Palestinians, but separate Palestinians from one another. So if you accept that, and or sort of that analysis, then part of the separation policy is not only won't help by putting Israelis together, Palestinians together, but part of the separation policy is about separating Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza. And therefore, part of my fear, part of my real fear, and I see this around me with my best friends and activists and so on, part of my fear is that we're sort of losing sight of what's happening on the ground. And as the Israeli, definitely this Israeli government is proactively pushing Palestinians into confined urban areas, right? Pushing Palestinians out of Area C. I think that the conversation of a vision is important, but we can't lose sight of the real practical dangers happening on the ground, from settler violence to military brutality to home demolition, so on and so forth. And the way to minimize that has to, I believe, happen by growing more power here within the Israeli society that will change the conversation. Hopefully have Palestinian unity and much stronger and proactive international pressure.
Avner, the Israeli governments have been in existence for 75 years. The two-state solution has been offered or suggested since 1947. Are you willing to acknowledge that those governments, the Israelis and the Palestinian governments, are unable to make peace, that there has to be a new government that would, I mean, what's wrong with having a common government for the whole area? I just don't feel, I don't understand what, and by the way, I heard you, I had to go to the bathroom, but I was listening to what you were saying, so.
Yeah. No, that's no problem. Even presidents have to go to the bathroom. It's
right. Well, I'm no longer president. Yeah.
No, look, I mean, I'm not a two-state extremist, right? I'll admit here that is a bit where I do think is still more realistic, but it's not that I'm in love with the idea. I think this is sometimes lost in the conversation of those who will accept any sort of partition of the land. It's a compromise. It's a compromise. As a liberal, as a progressive, I would be much happier, if we could, take down the wall and I wouldn't have to cross checkpoints to go visit friends. who live in Hebron or Nablus and so on. So, but I do think that part of and we're just 30 years for Oslo, so there's been a lot of conversations about Oslo. I mean, I think that there's a difference between how the Rabin government, Netanyahu government, Barak government led the Oslo process, right? Or Arafat Abu Mazen, and so on and so forth. And sort of the way it was translated into reality, right? For example, when you think about the Oslo process, I'm also glad I quit working for the IDF. I think the Oslo process, one very dramatic element within the process are the Paris Accords, right? Basically an economical stronghold on Palestinian lives, right? It's based Palestinians, from movement to water to trade. So we basically maintained our control. I think there is a question of not only a vision, but also where the problem stems from. And I think the problem stems from not only bad governments on both sides, which again, I've not a lot of good things to say about Hamas leadership or Palestinian Authority. I'd be happy to elaborate afterwards. I don't live under any of them, but speaking to many Palestinian friends and activists, it's no picnic. But I think it is fair to say, and this isn't only Israel bashing, I'm saying this also as an Israeli, but I think it's also fair to say, Israel is the one holding the power. And therefore, the question is not so much about one state or two state, but about how do we change that power imbalance? And how do we challenge the fact that, look, we have the most right-wing, crazy, messianic, extremist government, and the US is about to help us sign a normalization agreement with the Saudis. So, I mean, basically the feeling is, yes, if it's not broken, why fix it? And I think that part of the challenge, and this is a challenge for me as an Israeli, is how will there be constructive pressure that will allow us as Israelis to live with peace and dignity with our fellow Palestinians, and that has to be, I believe, with ending occupation. That's the first step. That won't end the conflict, but the first step is ending our control over the Palestinian people. I believe that could be the next step in starting to end the conflict.
All right, let's open questions. Let's start with Shlomo, then Nasir, then Charles, then Zohar. That's what I see on my screen in the order. So Shlomo, go ahead.
Can you put my name on the list, Joseph?
Oh, okay, Olivia.
Just put me on the list somewhere. Yeah, okay.
All right. Okay, Shlomo, go ahead.
Question number one. So I would like to go back to what Smotrich said, that there are three options for the Palestinians, and one of them is to give up any aspiration for a Palestinian state and so on. What if all the Palestinians decide, okay, you know what, we give up, we have agreed to become Israelis, to give up our aspiration for a Palestinian land, and we are just, all we want is equal rights, civil rights and human rights. Do you believe Smotrich and his government will say, okay, what do you think will be and is this, in your opinion, could be a solution? And if not, why not?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, I think the quick answer is that there could be no solution with this specific government, none whatsoever. I mean, we're talking about, I'm sure you know this, but like our interior minister, a guy named Itamar Ben-Gvir, had till a year and a half ago a picture of a mass murderer who killed 29 Palestinians in Hebron, an Israeli Jewish settler, Goldstein. I mean, we're not talking about. Smotrich said that he doesn't want that he doesn't want his wife to have children in the same room with her. And we're talking about real racism, right? Now that doesn't mean that all Israelis are racist in that way. I mean, I think that there's a lot of hope in the work that we do. I think we do see. I am hopeful that we can change, but it's not happening tomorrow. So it won't happen with this government. But I think. I think there are Palestinians here, or maybe people that, or maybe not. But I'm assuming that there's some Palestinians here, and others, that I've spoken to are not going to give up national aspirations tomorrow in the same way that Israelis will not. But even if theoretically, and I think we are hearing a few Palestinians talking about, more Palestinians talking about a one-state reality and so on. I think that in the end of the day. The Israeli society is a very, very national society. And I think that it will be very, very difficult. We're not talking about a reality where it's sort of a clean slate, right? But it's basically being part of a state that is getting gradually more religious, more nationalistic, and in many aspects more racist. Don't know fundamentally, but definitely. And I think that in the long run will be impossible. Will there be anyone that will accept it? Not this government. I don't think any government whatsoever. I think it's sort of like a statement if they give up national aspirations. That it's not. I don't see that happening on the sides of Palestinians. I don't see Israel accepting that as well.
Nasir.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Avner, thank you for participating today, and I thank you also for your work that you do for the support of peace. My question to you is that in looking at solutions like one-state solution, two-state solutions, or even the current situation, the status quo, do you think that the problem that why things failed, like why Oslo failed, why negotiations fail, why the status quo is failing now and continues to fail, is that there's two things, maybe equality and bad intentions. And like, if you look at, for example, Oslo, when Oslo was signed, where were the settlements? There was like 200,000 settlers in the West Bank. Today, there's 750,000. It never gave a clear vision to say, this is the end game, that, a Palestinian state, return of refugees to that Palestinian state, and maybe a few to back to their homes in 1948. That it's always been the issue. And even like if we say, like, look at people who support one state solution or other federation solutions, that even you have an internal problem with the 48 areas where Palestinians live and suffer, 60% of whom live in poverty and have problems to access to homes and building cities and education situations and under budgets and things like that. So this fundamental thing, first, I agree with you 100%. The occupation is number one. That's the start. Stop this occupation, even though some people here say the occupation doesn't exist, but it does. But the occupation, but the issue of equality and the intention to be fair to everyone. I think that's, I don't know, maybe you can see, is that kind of what you're saying, maybe?
I agree with that generally. I think there's sort of, Ron Pundak was one of the people who led the Oslo process, passed away a few years ago, sadly, but gave in one of his last interviews, he did talk about the fact that he believed that there was sort of lack of will, and lack of will is very important. I mean, political strategists think a lot about how to create that political will, and creating political will is hard work. But I do think it's interesting to look at, you spoke about Palestinian citizens of Israel, Palestinians of 48. If you look at the different groups between the river to the sea, right? Different sociological groups, within Israel, within the occupied territories, and so on and so forth. The group that historically and systematically are the biggest supporters of the two-state solution are Palestinian citizens of 48, historically. If you look at the numbers, right, they're constantly the biggest group that supports the two-state solution, which is interesting, right, because they're living in 48, right? So theoretically, you could say, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's that they understand the Israeli political sphere and understand that I think what I tried to convey, that the concept of sharing control means, in the eyes of Israelis, giving up control, right? Our sense of security, it's a distorted sense in my view, but our sense of security means control. I understand it psychologically. I'm not belittling it. I think Israelis definitely, we walk around with our traumas. I grew up during the Second Intifada. Friends of mine were killed. This obviously not to belittle Palestinian suffering, but I also think that Palestinians of 48 are probably the most important community in this equation.
Absolutely. But the thing is if you look at the way the legal system works, for example, there was a murder of a 19-year-old in Burqa a few weeks ago. The Jew who committed that, the Israeli Jewish guy who committed that murder, is in house arrest. A few days ago, there was an alleged stabbing on the train system in Jerusalem, across the street from Al-Musrara. A 14-year-old kid was shot, killed, basically judged, caught, tried, and executed. So what I'm saying is that these legal systems are not treating the people equal. And this was an Israeli resident. He wasn't someone from the West Bank. He wasn't someone from the occupied territory. He is a person who's
right.
Exactly. So if this legal system and equality doesn't even exist within Israel, how do we expect that to expand to the occupied territories?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And I think part of that's why I would argue that right to self-determination is important, is definitely important for Palestinians in the same way that it's important for many Israeli Jews. But I think that the disparities within Israel proper are definitely evident in the last couple months, years. The inability of the Israeli police to see Palestinian citizens of Israel as equal and use sort of the same tools, and so I think there is a motivation. There is a motivation to definitely do that. And again, I believe that one of the key components it could be, Ayman Udeh, the leader of the Joint List, says many times, that Palestinian citizens of Israel, could be the bridge, and he says, jokingly, I'm willing to be the table, right? I'm willing to bring both sides together. But at this point, with this government, we're very far from that, and I think that's important to understand.
Okay, let me read the order of questioners. It's going to be next Charles, then Zohar, then Olivia, then Saeed Aziz, and then Led Bennett. That's based on what I saw coming up. So, Charles.
Avner, I wanted to talk to you about this current political moment in Israel and the possibility of for change that might provide. And, obviously the first of all, in your opinion, do you think that Netanyahu is going to be successful in terms of pushing through the changes to the judiciary, which would basically destroy the final check on the president's power in order to keep himself out of jail? And the hundreds of thousands of people on the street who see that coming and are not happy with it. And yet there doesn't seem to be a lot of recognition between, let's call them the moderate Jews or moderate Zionists, as opposed to the far right settler that has become his base, to recognize that, there's 20% of the population that they could add to their numbers if they made some kind of accommodation about the disparity of rights that you were previously speaking of. So, and to me, it's an obvious question of, talk about democracy in Israel. Well, it's a democracy based on within the recognized boundaries, keeping 20% of the population a permanent minority and not recognizing the 5 million others that are under actual control. So do you see that this political moment, do you think the government's going to fall? And what could come after? Do you see any possibility for rapprochement with the 20% inside the borders of Israel to change the political dynamic?
So thank you for the question. I'm sharing something I wrote 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, was published, sharing a few of my thoughts on this. But I'll try to do something that I think helped me sort of think about our political reality and also this political moment. Israel, on many issues, economical issues for sure, doesn't have a right and a left, right? I mean, if you look at parties like Shas, or sometimes considered as like, you know, socialist, even though they're on the right or very religious. Meretz originated, which is seen as a left-wing party, originated from a liberal capitalistic element within society. But definitely when it comes to the conflict or the occupation, we don't have a right and a left. I will suggest to look at the Israeli society, again, the Israeli society, those who vote, as three political blocks. The biggest political bloc, which has led the country for most of its years, even in recent years, is what I could call the control camp. The control camp believes more or less in the status quo. And when it comes to the Palestinians, between the river to the sea, there's place for one sovereign country, which is Israel. If you look at Benny Gantz, if you look at Yair Lapid, if you look at Netanyahu, till his famous speech in 2012 even, right, the Bar Ilan speech, basically talked about the state minus autonomy plus, even Tzipi Livni will still use these terms. Okay, so we're talking about a political camp that generally believes in the status quo. Right now, this political camp has no answers when it comes to the conflict or the Palestinians, right? Now, for years, the Netanyahu governments were sort of more or less building their political alliance always with someone from the control camp and someone from the other camp, what I would call the annexation camp or apartheid camp. This was always a political camp within the Israeli society, believed in annexation of the territories, like Smotrich, like Ben Gvir, basically no rights and so on and so forth. For years, this was a smaller camp than the control camp. This government is the first time where the annexation camp is bigger than the control camp. The far right surpassed the center. We didn't have this in the past. Netanyahu always needed people from the center to build his government. He didn't have the numbers. This is the first time we have a government, as we call in Israel, al yamin male male. It's a full right-wing government that generally support annexation of territories and minimizing Palestinian rights and so on and so forth. And also the overhaul is part of that for different reasons. This is why this moment is very interesting, because if for so many years, the control camp understood that their only way to get into power, especially with Netanyahu and his power, was to join forces with the ultra-Orthodox and with Netanyahu, suddenly Netanyahu doesn't need them anymore. And if Netanyahu doesn't need the center, suddenly the center says, wait, who can I work with? Who can I build political power with? And now they're looking for the first time to the equality camp, to the left. And this is what I would call about a quarter of the Israeli society. 70% of Israeli society are Palestinian citizens of Israel. 7% of Israeli Jews are to the left, about 25% of Israeli society. The equality camp is attacked, is delegitimized, is constantly fighting for existence. Some of its parties didn't pass in the last election, but they're there. These are the people on the street, many of them, not all of them, right? But these are the potential numbers. And the question is, can we help mobilize or build the connection or pull the control camp to build a tie with the equality camp? The only time this happened in the Israeli history was with Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin was not part of the equality camp. He was part of the control camp that moved from control camp to build a tie with Meretz that have 12 seats. And many people don't remember this. He built his coalition based on Palestinian Israeli voters and politicians who were outside the government, right? This is why the right said he had an illegitimate government, because he saw Palestinian citizens as legitimate citizens. And I think that this is where we have to look at, and this is where this political moment is. Will the political center continue to grovel or go back to Netanyahu and say, push Ben Gvir out, let us in? Or will this be a moment of reckoning and say, Ben Gvir, Netanyahu, Smotrich are the same. Let's start building an alternative political camp. And that's where this moment is. It's a make or break. What will happen in a few weeks, basically, if we'll be in a constitutional crisis, right? If the Supreme Court will strike down the bill that was proposed, I think that the process that I suggested will happen quicker, right? If they'll basically, if there'll be they'll butt heads, right? This constitutional crisis between the Supreme Court and the government, I think this will hasten the control camp to potentially work together with the equality camp. And I think that's the only possibility to move forward. And obviously, in order for this to be significant, we need international pressure. We need a Palestinian leadership. We don't need Trump in the White House. But those are things that we can't control. In terms of what we can control, I think this is where politically things have to move.
And if
So,
there's-
so you're saying that they will come to a constitutional crisis before the Supreme Court ever strikes down the bill?
No. I'm saying if they will strike down the bill, we will be officially in a constitutional crisis.
And at that point,
At that point, if we're in a constitutional crisis, then basically the question is, who does the Secret Service take orders from? Right? If the Supreme Court says X, right, and they, for example, over this bill decide X, and the government decides Y, what happens? Now, this already happened, but it happened in the West Bank, and we didn't really pay attention to it. But we already were in a constitutional crisis where on the lands of Homesh, there is a settlement, Palestinian lands, where the settlers took over land illegally. And the legal advisors of the army told the chief of staff they should be taken down. The legal advisors of the army, not of breaking the silence, of the Israeli Defense Force, told them that this is an illegal structure and should be taken down. And the political leadership said the exact opposite. Both Gallant and Smotrich says, no, leave them. And the chief of staff sided with the politicians. So we were in that moment and they sided with the politicians. Now, this went under the radar because, it's the West Bank and so on and so forth. And, there's already really no rule of law there in that sense. But when it comes to Israel proper, this is a moment that could be very, very significant and will fuel the protesters. Now, if they don't strike it down and if they accept this bill, that's also very interesting because this will basically fuel the protesters even more.
All right, let's go to Zohar, then Olivia, then Saeed Aziz, and then Len Bennett. Zohar, please.
Thank you, Avner. Thank you, Joseph.
Do you know each other, Zohar and Avner?
No, I want to see him on Twitter and on different podcasts and stuff. Again, big fan. Thank
Great
you,
to
Avner,
meet
for
you.
doing your work. One, I wanted to ask, what do you think is the role of Jews abroad, or Jewish community abroad, or Israelis abroad in raising awareness about what's going on in Israel beyond the constitutional crisis we're talking about, the occupation? And I wanted to ask you a little bit about difficulties in trying to address the Jewish community abroad, considering the fact there's a lot of delegitimization process happening. The Israelism movie just came out recently. I don't know if people watched it, but it shows a little bit about the efforts of the Israeli government in strengthening the pro-Israeli narrative. And second, I'm sure you've read Gideon Levy's view several times now. He's talking about how the Oslo process was never meant to bring about peace, and we should stop talking about an end to the occupation and start talking about democracy for all. So if you can just choose to respond to each of these things, I will be grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Where are you from?
Ashdod.
Ashdod, cool. And you live abroad now, or you live in Ashdod?
No, I live in Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam, cool. Okay. Yeah, so we're planning a trip there soon, so let's be in touch.
Oh, yeah. Please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a big part of my work in breaking the silence for most of my years was geared towards Jews living outside of Israel. I think that part of the challenge, I think generally with diaspora communities, and there's a big Palestinian diaspora community, there's a big Jewish diaspora community. I think there's a growing Israeli diaspora community. I think, Sheldon Edelson has the IAC, right? Sort of an organization that is focused only for Israelis living in the US, organizing them, mobilizing them, educating them. I think that part of what I think we need more is chutzpah, audacity. We need to think at least, I want more, we need more, but at least in the same audacity that our political opponents are thinking, right? When you think about David Friedman, okay, an American Jew who was very active in his own community in support of Israel, and he translated his support of Israel into the support of settlements, right? Him and his wife has a building bearing their name on private Palestinian land near Beit El. Right now, you think of the political involvement of it's not only Jews; it's the evangelicals. It's generally people supporting the right. It's connections the right has with literally neo-Nazis in Europe, right? Legitimizing parties that for years Israel had no connections with. Now the Likud is building ties with the AfD and so on and so forth. So I'm not comparing our political allies to them, but we need more chutzpah. We need more ability to think of how are we building ties, who are we thinking with, how are we organizing our communities. Everywhere where that happens, it works. Everywhere, right? We had a meeting with the New Israel Fund about a year and a half ago. Israel Fund, right, a progressive body or a liberal body that supports Israeli NGOs, and we met with a bunch of them in Germany, in Berlin, and this was already in March of last year. I was there with a colleague, and we were talking about how can you organize and mobilize the community there, opening the conversation up around Israel-Palestine. And part of the challenge was, they said, yes, we want to bring more people, we don't know how. And we asked, what about the Israelis living in Berlin? There's so many of them, right? So many of our friends are living in Berlin or in Amsterdam also. We actually were thinking of doing something in Amsterdam. There's a lot of Israelis in Amsterdam. And part of what the people we met who were local Jews said, we're not connected to them, they're not organized. So we basically said, we're going to put together an event. And a few months later, this year, we brought a play from Israel of 3 amazing actors. It was all in Hebrew. It was based on female testimonies. It's this sort of musical cabaret. We brought it to Berlin, and we brought 120 Israelis together. And the whole evening was in Hebrew. And they had a blast. It was like amazing. They didn't have so many Israelis together in one room, and it was a moment to organize and think together. And I think that part of what we have to think of is how do we do that? How do we use these meetings as well, or bringing in new ideas, challenging ideas, bringing knowledge there. I think the protest movement is a good wake-up call of how easy it is to put just a bunch of people we know in a WhatsApp group and start thinking and organizing together. And we need that. We need that. We need that. You need that. We all need this sort of joint thought process, because many times there'll be a feeling that people are speaking on the behalf of the Jewish community, or people are speaking on behalf of Israelis living abroad, or people are speaking on behalf of Palestinians in the diaspora. And I think that we have to organize as communities, and we have to think together how to build these bridges and use those bridges. The communities that have done this, we see how they manage to shape not only the conversation within the conversation within Jewish or Palestinian communities, but also affect the conversation within their countries, right? Which is actually extremely important at the end of the day.
All right, let's go to.
Yeah, there was another
Olivia.
question I didn't get to, so I'll get to it. We'll continue the conversation maybe later.
Okay, Olivia, Zohar, do you still have questions?
No, I just said thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Olivia, Saeed Aziz, Len Bennett, and Frankie Wilmer.
Hello,
And
good
then
evening.
Sean.
Well, like,
Samir,
And Samir, I didn't see your hand, I'm sorry. Okay.
I have it.
hello, good evening. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You can hear me okay, okay. Well, good evening. And like Zohar, I'm a big fan of yours, though I'm not Israeli, I live in Europe. I've followed what you do. I think it takes, to go against the IDF, I think it takes one heck of a lot of bravery and courage, plus possible retaliations from ex-colleagues and family, God knows what. So I commend you for that immensely. I'm sure we all do. Now, you did mention, you used the words international pressure. Now, there you hit me on the head, because we in the West, starting with the US, I'm in Europe, but we in Europe, we take our marching orders from Washington, just follow along, little lapdogs. We are perpetuating the abuse of Palestinians, and there's no doubt about that. The immense flow, well, it's like having an alcoholic husband and giving him regularly a bottle of whiskey. You become an enabler. We are enablers. And so things are not going to change unless aid, which is massive from the US, all time, not only financial, military, political, everything, diplomatic, unless aid is conditioned, unless there are conditions, things are not going to change. And you also mentioned the diaspora. It's very, very important what the diaspora does. But I'm sure you're aware of what the Israel lobbies do. In the UK, what they do is amazing. It's incredible. It is totally incredible. Now, the more you research this with all the publications that have been done, the more you find how they insinuate themselves into every sphere of life. Universities, I mean, if you mention the word Palestine, mention the word, a word of criticism against Israel, perfectly rational, moderate language, you're accused of being anti-Semitic. This thing has gone really over the top. So people say, well, I just don't have the time, so I'm just not going to deal with that. I don't have the time. People have been fired and lost their jobs, accused of being anti-Semitic. So that is very, very important. So it's very important that the diaspora Jewish community, plus the Jews. Now,
Olivia, can you get to the question, please? Because we have a lot of...
These are just comments asking if he agrees. They're just comments like everyone else is commenting, Joseph, including yourself. If we cross the pond to the US, there are more evangelicals than there are Jews. Now, there are evangelicals that are very, very right-wing, messianic, and very much and support the ultra Israeli right-wing. Now, God help the Palestinians if there's a Republican president. That's what I say, with the backing of all these evangelicals. That's another horrendous scenario, but it's next year. So what I say is that we have to stop supporting, or we have to condition our support. Otherwise, things are not going to change. like the woman who gives her husband a bottle of whiskey and he's an alcoholic. He goes on being an alcoholic and she's an enabler. We are enablers. End of story. Thank you again for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I just very quickly. I mean, I generally agree. I mean, I will say that I think that there was a very well needed and important element in the fact that Jews pre or post Second World War organized, right? And I think that was those structures that saved my family fleeing Europe and then to the UK and then to the US. I think were and are very important structures. I think sadly what has happened is that those structures have been abused. Those structures have been abused, and instead of being used to a power, a tool for good, right? Thinking about bodies like the AJC that literally saved, and helped my grandparents' family. They're now being used as a tool of weaponizing anti-Semitism in the sense that has basically I think has made it almost impossible, not impossible, but much more difficult to have real conversations. And
Sure.
I don't know, in my book, what's more Jewish than having a real conversation? Right. And I think that in that sense, it's a very dangerous phenomenon. And yeah, I generally agree in terms of the question about aid and conditioning aid and tying it together not only with abuses but powers of good. So yeah, I thank you for your remarks.
Okay, Saeed, Lane, Frankie, Sean, and Samir. Saeed.
Good morning from California. My name is Saeed Aziz. I'm a Palestinian from a little town called Miami of the West Bank. It's Al-Mizra'a Al-Sharqiyya, next to a military settlement from 1967, next to a settlement called Ofra. I spent 2 times in prison, one of them 2 years, straight 2 years, torture when I was 17 years old. I'm 52 years old right now. And the first time I ever communicate with an Israeli was Joseph Abbasar. So to me, after 52 years, it's like a wake-up call. But the reality, I will disagree with a lot of things that you're saying, especially who control Israel. And I personally does not believe, I'm getting to this age, I'm living like a king here, but there is something hunting me every day for the rest of my life, that the memory I have and the action I see today, how Israel and this government going to right and getting worse and worse and worse. And frankly, I will tell you, no matter what we do, the person who can, the power who can change the fact in the ground in that state is the United States of America. A Democrat and Republican will disagree with every single thing in life until it comes to the interest of Israel. They all agree. So to me, as a Palestinian, and I have a cousin who is the highest Palestinian senator ever became in Brazil. His name is Omar Aziz. He's a senator today in Brazil for second time, and he was a governor of the state of Amazonas. I appreciate all your work, Avner. You are amazing. I watch you a few times. I see Mr. Abbasar, how hard you work. But until we can sit together, and not necessarily in Palestine, Israel, we can start from here. Because this 120 million evangelical in this country who's controlling us more than we control ourselves. Every president, every lobby in this country who control the interests of Israel more than the Israelis themselves. So my recommendation, and I did this recommendation to Joseph before, I am influential person. I consider to be influential person in TikTok, okay? When I put one video, it goes to 200,000-300,000 when I speak about politics, because I lived a period of my life where I saw war and I saw peace and I saw now instability. We need to start with the American, Palestinian, Israelis together, at least the American or South America. We need to start putting the communities together, because like the lady from England said, Oliva, she said, or maybe I'm not sure who said that, they say, you have powerful lobby here. They are doing big work, and you cannot even mention Palestine. People, when I say Palestine, they say Pakistan. They don't even recognize my existence today. When I talk to them, they don't know. So I recommend that we work together as the Zionist dream started from Europe by Herzl. We can start putting the Palestinian and Israelis together, because now we are open-minded. I could be going to Joseph and have a lunch with him and accept the fact that he's an Israeli and Palestinian. I think we need to do a lot of work, and the work has to start from the United States of America. Thank you.
Avner has limited time, so let's go to all the questions and then he'll answer all of them. And if we
Okay, well, it's my turn now. It's my turn. It's Len Bennett.
Yes, Len, ask your question, Len. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I just want to point out that to date there is no Palestine. I like to say too to Avner, I note that you got your master's degree at Columbia. Columbia is listed as the North American university that is the worst university for Jewish students. and it's just before Vassar. Other things I'd like to say, you talk about international pressure. I think the international pressure has to back off and mind their own business. You have plenty of international pressure with the United Nations and all the organizations the United Nations controls. You have the United Nations, which is dominated by the 56-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation and by the Russian-Chinese blocs, all of them against the one Israeli. So talking of international is a big fraud. And as far as US aid goes, yeah, as far as US aid goes, US gives Israel about $3 billion military aid a year. And America gets back far more than that in weapons upgrades and development that they would not have done. Plus the fact that Israel is the only reliable ally of the United States in the West Bank, in the Middle East, and its intelligence is invaluable for saving American lives. And several other things. You want to talk about occupation? There is no occupation under international law. There's occupation. There's occupation under Palestinian propaganda, under Article 80 of the UN Charter. And if any of you go and look at it, Sean. It says that what was promised the Jews at San Remo and the League of Nations cannot be taken away from them. And the fact that in 1947, the UN made a petition to separate the Jews from the Arabs, and the Arabs refused. That was a suggestion, but it was against their own charter. And you will remember that the Jews agreed, but the Arabs did not, and launched the Nakba. And when you talk about occupation, you have to also at the same time
Joseph, I'm sorry to interrupt this. This is too much. I can't listen to this. You're full of bullshit.
This is bullshit.
I'm sorry, Joseph.
You're bullshit too. I will ask.
You're full of nonsense.
I will.
You live in a parallel universe, man.
Wake the fuck up. I would like to ask our guest a question.
Glenn, let's
Shut him, Joseph.
Let's go to Sean and let's go to.
I'm leaving. I'm leaving this call. I'm leaving this call. Goodbye.
Okay, Nabil, it's enough.
Nabil, don't leave.
Avner has.
I want to ask.
Goodbye.
Good luck, Habibi. Good luck.
I want to ask our guest the question: if we're going to talk about Israeli occupation, we also have to talk about the occupation of particularly by the Bedouins in Area C, which is under Israeli control, where they have 81,000 illegal structures built primarily with EU money.
Okay, Sean and then Samir and then Avner will answer and then he has to go, so.
Okay, Avner, I know you have to go, and I want to make this quick. And I heard what you mentioned earlier in the meeting, that you mentioned about the IPC coming into the Israel and Palestinian camp, and you mentioned that Israel will not give up its control, and if IPC comes into place, then Israel will not allow it to do very much in its power. So, and if there's any changes that IPC does with Israel and Palestine, it probably won't be a major thing, and according to what you're saying, right? So, my question is like nothing will go really far with Israel in its right wing right now. Is this true, Avner?
Okay, and let's go to Samir and then we'll have Avner answer all these questions.
All right. Hi, everybody. This message is for Israelis, all the Israelis. Today, what they need to do is to bring down Netanyahu's government. That's number one. Number two, the Israelis, all Israelis, they should realize that Jewish state is bad for the Jews, bad for Israelis. Number three, they have to end the occupation. That's the elephant in the room. end the occupation. Number 4, end the apartheid system. End the apartheid system. And I think if these things will happen, then a solution will come up. And that will be obviously one secular democratic state. And that I will stop.
All right,
That
thank
will
you.
be, that will be taken
Let-
over by
Let's
George
go
Burdett.
let's go to Avner and then closing remarks. Please, Avner.
Okay, wow, thank you. So I mean, there were a lot of things. I'm not sure how much of that were questions or remarks. I will say that I think Sean, is it Sean Zahir?
Yeah, Sean Zahar.
Yes.
Sean Zahar. I mean, I think that generally, I think it's really important to continue to challenge what's happening. So yeah, I generally think that it will be very hard to see any dramatic change tomorrow, definitely not with this government. But I think it's important to continue to have a conversation because the conversation forces us to question assumptions. And so, you know, I don't see the IPC government or parliament, you know, happening tomorrow, but I think it's definitely an interesting conversation to have with my reservations. Len, I will, you know, just point something out, and I didn't agree with a lot of your remarks, but look, I think that in the end of the day, I think that part of sort of the moment of reckoning that is happening amongst Israeli society in big numbers, not everyone. There's some Netanyahu supporters or Smotrich supporters, but I do think there is something happening within the Israeli society, and I think part of that is an outcome of sort of years of neglect. There was sort of not sort of diving into what's happening within the territories, and I think that part of what this moment should allow us to do is rethink some assumptions and at least question for those that historically or throughout the years have been sort of staunch supporters of everything Israel has ever done. Think if someone like Itamar Ben-Gvir or Bezalel Smotrich is the right kind of representation for that state, and if not, ask how did we get here. But you know, that's sort of up to you. And yeah, I mean, thank you for inviting me and
Let me just make a closing remark. Unlike a lot of what we're saying here, I believe a common democratic government can bring peace. Well, no one challenged that, but I believe that the common government could make peace. One online election is feasible. The country of Estonia is holding online election with 9.5 million people. I believe that the difference between creating a common government and what we have now is really $100 million. And one day of war between Gaza and Israel, full-fledged war, is more than $100 million. This is what $100 million also buys, and that is a Picasso picture, a jet, a mansion in Los Angeles. $100 million is not a lot of money. That could be used to make peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. I think really that's the only reasonable solution that is being offered at this time. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Avner. I'm not sure if he hears us, but I want to thank all of you for participating. Hope to see you again in 2 weeks, and hope that you'll think about what was said today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.